Hello and welcome back to the Primal Pursuits podcast. I'm your host, Mike Merrill, and we got my son Canyon here cooking along too.
How's it going?
And then we have, my new favorite guest for sure.
aren't I the first one?
No. Yeah.
Just kidding.
I wouldn't do that to you. I had
Okay,
to get a
good.
few under our belt before I brought you on here.
It's like
So
it's like I have one son, and I'm like, dude, you're my favorite son.
Yeah, that's true. I pull that dad card all the time because Canyon's my only son. So we have James, the Iron Cowboy Lawrence. How you doing, James?
Brother, I couldn't be better, man. Just life is good, God is good, and we're just thriving.
Amen. I love that. Well, it's taken us a hot minute to get this all strung together, but I think the stars have aligned and
We finally got it done. I think all good things come to those who wait.
Oh, I love it. Oh, cool. Well, we're excited. We know it's going to be a special treat. We definitely appreciate you joining us today.
For sure, man. Thank you. It's my only day in town this week.
Yeah. Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I fly back out tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
I've got
you got
five events in 5 days next week.
Speaking or
All speaking, yeah.
Your son's got is it a basketball game?
Yeah, basketball game.
Okay, cool.
Little junior jazz over here.
So obviously, James, we'll get into a little bit more about, your and my connection. But before we do, I wanted to give a little backstory. And this really overlays, you and I were texting before this, and I mean it with all sincerity. I have a huge debt of gratitude towards you for being an inspiration for me and my current fitness journey, which I've been on for, this is like 11 years straight now. Like every day I'm thinking about these things. And it was spawned off of a discussion you and I had at a Memorial Day barbecue, a family event. And you were talking to me about this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal that you had to complete 50 full Ironman distance triathlons in 50 days in all 50 states in the US. And I thought, you're freaking psycho, man. There's no way you're going to do that. And so you already had some world records at that point. You'd already done some amazing things, but I don't know if you recall that discussion. Probably not. It was big for me. So,
well, I don't recall that specifically, but I remember having conversations like that. And what was fascinating is you're right. We had broken 2 world records, and we were trying to do fundraising at the time and get sponsorship because these big projects we do, they're not cheap, and we bootstrapped everything to that point. And it was interesting because the companies we were contacting and sponsors I was working with, they were like, holy cow, that's incredible, but we can't afford to associate ourselves with a failure. Yeah. And I'm like, I haven't failed yet. And they were like, yes, but it's too big, too crazy. You're going to fail. And we can't put our name on that. And so your reaction was very, it wasn't out of the norm. And it was, because a lot of people, I struggle from time to time because we do get a lot of that pushback. It's impossible and it can't be done, because people are, when they're hearing about our story for the first time, they don't realize that there's 15 years of foundational work that went into that moment, right? Because people see headlines and go, can't do that, that's impossible. But they don't realize, like 15 years before that, I struggled through a 4-mile fun run before the world records, before all those things. And so I joke and I say I'm an overnight success. It only took 15 years.
Yeah. I've shared that quote a time or 10 too. So what's interesting is that, and again, I'll give a little more detail and context to our conversation. I had joked with you, and as I had with so many before, oh, you know what? I cannot stand running. I hate running. I'm not a runner. Swimming, great. Love riding a bike. I could do that. Done 100-mile bike rides around Utah Lake, a bunch of times with the Boy Scouts, and, really cool things like that, challenges. But I thought, I can't run. And you challenged me at that time. You said, just start with a 5K, and you were telling me your story. And so I set out that I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to do this. And I told you at that moment, I'm going to come with you on this journey. I'm going to run that marathon with you. And this was like over a year ahead of that. And so that beginning of that next January and December leading into, I started running for the first time in my life, like for pleasure and for fitness, and not just chasing a ball or trying to tackle somebody. Right. And so that started me on that journey. And I ran my first marathon with you on day 42 around Lake Waconia in Minneapolis, Minnesota area.
I remember one of the TV personalities from The Biggest Loser was there that day too. And it was deep in the journey. And so it was kind of an interesting moment for us because we were really picking up momentum. and it was the point where we're at 42, we've got 8 more to go, and it almost seemed like it was a formality at that point. And I love that you came out and I got to share your first marathon with you. And so it became these moments along the way that were special and memorable because they all kind of blended together. And so I really appreciated the support, you coming out and really keeping to your word that you were going to do that. And we kind of both had that humble beginning, 5K, 4 mile fun run, kind of similar things. Weren't runners to start with, but set this big goal for ourselves from where we were sitting to where we wanted to get to. And I remember you showing up, and obviously I was in the middle of craziness and had forgotten that you were coming. And then it was just such a great moment to see a friendly face in the midst of suffering. People have no idea how big it is to see a friendly face that you can, it brings back times before the suffering when that person, those memories come back. And so thank you.
Yeah, your wife Sunny, who I adore almost as much as you, but she's my first cousin. Our moms are sisters, and
Yeah.
and she had to kind of shake you out of it. I came to the pool, you were getting ready to swim, and you were in such a daze because of just this typhoon of everything that you were doing and overcoming. And she kind of grabbed you by the shoulders and said, James, it's our cousin Mike. He came out here to join you. And it was like you snapped into it, and you said, Mike. And you got kind of teary-eyed, and you gave me a hug, and you said, thank you so much. There's just nothing more important to me than family. And it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
And I felt so special that you acknowledged that in that moment. And throughout that journey, and I struggled to finish that marathon. I actually didn't finish it right at the end. I had to run another couple laps around the park because I didn't have my mileage in, because about mile 23, I was just, I was actually under, I didn't have enough nutrition. I didn't have enough salt. I was underhydrated. I'd never done this before.
And it was really hot and humid.
It was, yeah, it was in the 90s. Yeah, it was rough.
It was brutal. People questioned all the time. They're like, you're going through the South and all these really hot places in June and July. And again, back to family, I was like, I've got these 5 kids. I'm not willing to do this without them. They are my 5 biggest reasons I'm doing this. And we're piling into the motorhome, and we're going across during the hottest months of the summer. And they were like, and that's why you'll fail. And I'm like, that's why I'll succeed.
Such a journey. That was just the beginning of a lot of other things that you've done since then. But I just, wanted to thank you for helping start me on that journey. I had, you, and then another mentor of mine, Cameron Haynes, who, is Keep Hammering hat. We've talked about him in the past. In fact, I gave a personalized book that you signed for him, and gave him a message when your first book came out. And Redefine Impossible, I want to say, is that
yeah. And actually, this is our new book right here, and Cam Haynes did a little insert on it for us. Yeah, so Cam Haynes wrote. We actually share a publisher, and so the same publisher that did Cam's book did ours, and he was gracious enough to write a little blurb for us. And so I have high hopes that I'll still be able to talk to him, but we're trying to arrange that.
I'm sure that'll happen. We'll get to more of that later with the Cam connection. But anyway, I know, Canyon, I know you got some things that you wanted to weigh in on and ask James. So let's go there.
I have a brand new family, a little baby about to turn 2. And thinking about your story and, just hearing over the years what you've been able to accomplish, I've always been curious on what has your family done as far as support for you specifically to be able to accomplish all that you have. I mean, you said you've been working on this for 15 years, right? That takes a lot of time and dedication to your craft there. So how has your family been able to support you on your journey to achieve these insane feats?
I think that was one of the most amazing things, was to give my kids a front row seat to chaos, confusion, disaster, failures, but also success, camaraderie, teamwork, love, compassion, empathy, all the things. They got to see both, all the bad and all the good. And I think as a parent, you want to showcase both of those things. And it was amazing. My kids were super little when we were on this 50 journey, which was 50 Ironmans, 50 days, 50 states. And the first 2 world records, they were really young. So they really didn't know what was going on. But during the 50, especially my older girls, they were very aware, very involved, and played an absolute instrumental role. I still, to this day, tell stories from stage about my daughters and the role that they play. In fact, my oldest daughter runs my entire company now, full time. And wow. It's just amazing. She runs everything. And so I'm not the Iron Cowboy. We are the Iron Cowboy. And it's just been so fun to watch them grow. And we got so many compliments. I mean, my two oldest girls were, 11 and 12 on the 50. And they were in there selling shirts and running the 5Ks. And we just kept getting these amazing compliments back from people that came with us. And they were like, your kids looked at us when we were having a conversation, and they were, fully engaged in all these things. And I was really shocked with, obviously, social media is a dumpster fire. There's so much great and so much bad. But I started getting these comments of like, this is child abuse and you're dragging your kids across the country. And I was just like, y'all have no clue, man. They are having the time of their lives. They learn so much from doing these things. And I hear people all the time. They're like, "Oh, I want to wait. I want to still live my life and have adventures, and kids are going to drag me down." And I'm like, dude, I've got 10 things on my resume that people would love to do one of them, and I did it with the kids and all 5 of them, and they learned so much from participating in them. They love being part of them. My kids have fond memories. We sit and tell stories. Dude, you think my 12-year-old son at the time was like upset that he's in a Netflix documentary? Like, he's pounding his chest at school, telling all his friends. Like it's so funny, perception and perspective, and people just have no idea how tight of a family unit we are. And like I just said, I refused to do this on my own, and that's why we chose probably the most reckless and dangerous time of year for me to physically do something like that. I mean, Tennessee, in the middle of it, day 18, 106 degrees outside with humidity. And we're out there just grinding and just, so to answer your questions, one, the family is the centerpiece of everything we do. I couldn't have done it without them. I'm not the Iron Cowboy. We're the Iron Cowboy. And I attribute a lot of these challenges that Sunny and I dragged our kids on to them being outstanding young adults and teenagers, like just phenomenal kids.
I love it. Yeah. And it goes to show, obviously, the example that you're providing, what that's able to do for your kids at such a young age, being able to look at someone like you and in their own challenges or things that they want to accomplish. They'll always have this example to look to and say, hey, maybe I can push a little bit harder.
Well, and it's interesting too, because we don't have necessarily rules in our home. We have expectations, and then our style of parenting is, here, let Sunny and I lead the way and show you what doing hard things intentionally feels like, misstepping and standing back up and continuing to move forward. And instead of like telling your kids to do that, we chose to show them what that looked like, and it proved to be a very beneficial path for us as parents to take them on, because again, we have incredibly resilient kids. And I'm just straight up contrasting them against their peers at the same age, at the same time, and where they are compared to a lot of their peers is quite significant.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've always noticed this, through this entire thing, before the 50 and now the Conquer 100, which we'll get into more later. I was able to join you on 3 of those marathons, and my wife did her first marathon with you during that. It was really incredible. But you've always said we, and that might be your wingman, that might be, your chiropractor, that might be your nutritionist, that might be your doctors, all these people that are.
It's the people that showed up,
I've never heard you say
and ran with me.
In any of this, but I know that you live it, and again, just like
I knocked that guy out in the ring.
That part, yes, yeah, I want to get to that. Yeah,
that's the only time I'll use I. That was me and my right hand.
Yeah. So, well, let's just jump into that. So you got a pro card. You did a professional boxing match for charity, OUR. Talk about that.
Dude, it was crazy. I took we raised a lot of money for OUR and have a relationship with them, and this was post Conquer 100. And an opportunity came to be the main event at this boxing fight in Utah. And, I've lived my life in a way that when an opportunity comes across my desk, if it terrifies me, and I want to say no, I pause, take a deep breath, and then I say yes, because I know there's something to learn in this situation. And I grew up a wrestler, but there's just something different in a ring. You can't run anywhere. He's trying to knock your head off. And Mike Tyson's quote, everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the mouth. And it's so funny because we get the UFC fights at our house all the time, and the guys sitting on the couch are like, "Oh, you bum, and I could do this, and just stand up, and what are you doing?" And I just like, in my mind, I'm like, guys, you have no idea. You have like no idea until you actually do something like that. And I had 8 weeks to prep for this fight, and it was in the middle of, I mean, I do tons of speaking events. I was training for the Extreme World Championships, the Extreme Triathlon World Championships in Norway. And so like, I did not have time to prepare for this, and did the best I could. And man, it was a very humbling experience, because I go into the gym and I start working with a one-on-one trainer, and I was like, okay, I need some help. I'm going to hire this guy one-on-one instead of these group classes. And that you have to go and prove your skills a certain level before they let you spar. Well, my time comes to spar, and they're like, okay, you spar with them, you get a couple 1-minute rounds in the ring. James, you're with Anna. And I'm like, Anna? I'm like, that sounds like a chick. and I'm like, I don't want to hit Anna. And I get in the ring. Anna beats the shit out of me. I don't have that. I don't want to hit Anna, so I don't hit Anna. And I just take punch after punch after punch. And I literally, after this was over, I took my headset off. I walked into the parking lot, and I just started to bawl. And I was just in tears. I was emotional. I'd never been hit in the head before. I've never been punched in the face. I've never been required to hit not only a girl, but a human being. It's just not in my nature. You know me, Mike, I'm a lover. Like, I love everybody and I want everybody to win. I don't want to punch anybody. Like, wrestling's different. Like, it's controlled, but I'm not like physically punching you in the face. But especially a woman. I've got 4 daughters. I've got a wife. I got a mom, like all these things. And so it was this really, really terrifying, like humbling moment for me. And I was like, I've made a huge mistake. Like, I can't do this. And coach came out and kind of talked me off the ledge and sat me down. I remember going home that night and just like having a shower, and I'm just like, waterfalls. Like, I am just like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And so went back to, the gym, a couple days later, and coach was like, okay, man, let's talk about this. And he's like, how do we gamify this? How do we make this like, not like, you're not trying to like hurt this person. It's a sport. And so we really walked through that. And then I had another sparring session, and I became more comfortable with it. And man, that quote, Mike Tyson, it's so real. You get hit in the face and you get rattled, and you have to compose yourself and calm down. And anyways, 8 weeks passes, and it is the night. And 1,200 people are in the stadium, and you and all your brothers and sisters are there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't lose. And I filled half the stadium with people that wanted to come see me fight. And I'm fighting this litigation attorney. And I'm like, dude's got nothing to lose. If I get knocked out by an accountant, and you guys saw the first 15 seconds of this fight, I get pummeled.
He was coming at you.
Yeah. He came at me with everything. I get backed into the corner. 15 seconds into this fight, I'm taking a standing 8 count. And I'm like, yep, Mike Tyson was right. This is nowhere close to my game plan. And this is like life, right? So we're going to get hit. We're going to get punched. We're going to get knocked down, and someone's going to come and start counting. And that's where we have to make a decision. Okay, am I going to get back to the center of the ring? Am I going to square up? And am I going to take control? Now, that's the past now. I just took a standing 8. That's the past. Doesn't define me. What am I going to do next? Right? And it was interesting because I'll tell the end of the fight here in a second. But after the fight, both my wife, and it was streaming live to everybody, and my dad was watching it from Canada. And I got texts from both my dad and Sonny, and she said, as soon as you stepped back off the ropes, we saw it in your face. You'd made a decision and you switched. And it's, we in life, we have to create these alter egos in our lives. And it's a superhero version of us and not. And my superhero version is the Iron Cowboy. There's James Lawrence, father, husband, compassionate person, loves everybody. And then there's then there's the Iron Cowboy. And as we've proven through history, that he's a bad man. And I came up off the ropes, and I flipped a switch. And in like time slows down in those moments, right? And in my head, I was like, that's everything he's got. And I'm still standing. That's as hard as he can hit me. And that's as fresh as he'll ever be. And I got back into the ring. And as you know, 20 seconds later, knocked out, fell out of the ring. and I just exploded. It was the most electric feeling I've ever felt. 12,000 people blow up, except for his people. Like the president of Pepsi was there, and all of his like big corporate clients. And I did the I felt so bad because I watched the video back, and I do the WWE Gen X thing, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. But it was just so like explosive and energetic, and it was real. And I've broken 4 world records. I've crossed close to 200 Ironman finish lines. I've gone to world championships. I went undefeated my senior year in wrestling. I won state. Like, there was nothing as explosive and electric as that moment that, like, mano a mano, boom, and then an eruption happens. It was just so, you were there. I mean, you felt the energy in the arena and my emotion. And it was just this really cool. All my kids front row, ringside on a VIP table. It was just like, it was a moment, and I'll never forget it. I'm never getting in the ring again. I never want to have that experience again.
Okay, that was.
I retire. You know, me and Mayweather, man, we're both undefeated. That's just how it is.
Leave it
undefeated, baby, and I'm gonna retire undefeated.
Yeah, I actually on Canyon too. We both got some great footage of that, and and I remember I thought the same thing. I'm like, I saw that look change. I saw that you went from defense to offense. I'm like, you are going to freaking kill this dude. Like, I could see it. And when you did, and watch you explode and dancing and pumping, and it was like, this is a different James.
Yeah,
So
it was fun. I had so much fun. Great. I'm so glad I won.
Fun.
I'm so glad I won, and it was a lot of fun. I'm thrilled the way it turned out. Lily, one of my daughters, still to this day, she was like, that was the most incredible night I've ever been a part of.
Oh, man.
And she's had front row seats to everything I do, like the whole journey. And she was like, that was electric.
Have you always been able to flip that switch on, or is that something that you've had to build up to with proof of action, like everything you've achieved?
Yeah, great question. And I think it is like anything, it's a skill set that you develop over time. And you can't, one of the concepts I teach now is you can't go from 0 to 100, which means you have to build momentum and you have to start stacking wins. And, one of my quotes I love to say is success breeds success and confidence breeds confidence. And a lot of people fail in life is because they go so big, so quick without all of the groundwork. And then they fail in that moment. And then they're like, okay, I can do it. And then they set a monster goal and then they try it again and they fail and they don't do the work and the preparation. And then unfortunately, they start to associate themselves as a failure because of those moments. And then they start to believe it and then they stop trying. And it's about creating all of those small wins along the way and that momentum that allows you to have that confidence and skill set to be able to flip that switch. I can now get into the flow state. It's crazy because on the 100, which we'll get into, I could get into a moment where I was in such despair and pain. I was having an out of body experience. And I talked about it in the book that you guys just finished listening to. But that you can't just go, okay, I'm in trouble. I'm going to have that experience without all the preparation leading up to it, having multiple experience to where the scale turns and shifts and you can get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm in trouble. I need to go third party.
Yeah. It's amazing too, because James, and you shared this, you shared it with me, to me personally, before it came out in your first book or before I ever heard you tell the story, but you talked about, when you were showing gratitude to your foot and your ankle and working up your body in the pool. And I'd never even heard anything like that, but it's such it feels like an eternal principle to me, where like that gratitude that you had was so overflowing that like you just had to communicate with the part of your body that was not functioning the way you needed it to, but you were encouraging it and coaching it along. I mean, tell us about that.
Yeah. I'm big on gratitude. Every single morning, as cliche or cheesy as it sounds, and I don't know how many people do this, but like, because of experiences that I've had, I recognize tomorrow's not guaranteed. And I wake up every single day, hand over heart, feel the beat. I take a breath of fresh air, realize that gift. And when both my feet hit the ground, I'm expressing gratitude and I say, thank you. I get to do it one more time today. And it's so funny. Like recently I've been, going to the bathroom and I'm like, thank you for processing this stuff out of my body. I'm just like so appreciative. And as we age, we appreciate things differently. And when we're younger, we take for granted we're bulletproof and can bounce off cement and things like that. But as we age, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this. And the aches and pains start coming in and we have to like pay more attention to it. And so I got into a lot of trouble really quick on the 100 because we didn't prepare for very much time because the window of opportunity and the creation of this project was so fast. And I got injured really fast. And during the pool portion of it, or the swim portion of it, it was in an outdoor pool here in Linden, Utah. It was very controlled. It was the safest I felt at any day because it was like I said, very controlled environment. And so it was almost therapeutic or meditative for me. And during that time, I was expressing gratitude the whole time swimming. And I was talking to, I would start at my toes and I would talk to each individual body part saying, hey guys, we're a team. And I would thank, and I'd go through my entire body and I'm thanking every system and everything and say, okay, we've got work to do today because on the other side of this, we can create history. And once we do that, we can impact other people's lives, which is the goal. And I can't do it without you. And so I'd have these conversations with myself and that mind-body connection, right? And so I got really detailed because I was swimming for about an hour, 20 minutes every single day. And it was a check-in with my system and my body and where my mindset was. I was doing forgiveness statements. I was dreaming. It was this really, really crazy hour 20 that I got to start every single day. And looking back on it, it was just the safest I felt. And it was a true gift between mind, body, and spirit. It was very spiritual moments for me.
I can imagine. I mean, and again, in the pool, and again, I've run 4 of these marathons with you on these 2 journeys. And we had a lot of discussions during those. I mean, maybe hours total in conversation. But when you're in the pool, it's just you in the water. I mean, there's really you can't talk to anybody. You're not listening to music. Like you're left with the thoughts inside of your own head. And so how you chose to spend that time, another quote, I wanted to get back to this. Cam Haines, I know, keep hammering, that resonates with you in so many ways, I'm sure. But he has another quote that I just love, and I think of it all the time when I'm doing something difficult and it starts to really suck. And he says, obsession is lonely, because it's like, it's a one-person sport when it's just you and whatever it is that is in front of you that's difficult. Talk about that and how that relates to these thoughts.
Well, I think you can resonate too. Success is lonely, or the road to success is lonely, right? Because in order to become successful at anything or great at anything or separate yourself from average, there's a lot of sacrifices that happen along the way. And you're right. Those are lonely moments. And what I have found in traveling around the world and speaking is people simply aren't comfortable having conversations with themselves. They're not okay sitting in silence. We live in a world of dopamine hits every 8 seconds with social media and scrolling and all these dopamines. And I mean, it was so funny. I saw this clip the other day on Instagram, scrolling, of this guy. He was like, it was a comedian, and he was talking about mindfulness. And he was like, dude, in the 80s and 90s, the word mindfulness didn't exist. He's like, when we were going to the bathroom, mindfulness. When I was sitting on the bus, mindfulness. Like we didn't have to create moments of like grounding and meditation, and everything, because we spent so much time with ourselves, just sitting there. Like, but now everywhere we go, there's distraction and screens and dopamine hits everywhere. And so we have to intentionally seek that like alone time and mindfulness. And it was funny, I share a story in my first book and on stage about the Calgary Stampede. And the highlights of the story is I sat on the Ferris wheel. It's the largest rodeo in the world. It's 10 days long. And anyways, there was a contest, who can sit on the Ferris wheel the longest. And I get on the Ferris wheel to win this cash prize. And the beginning part of the story is 3, 4, 5 days in. Like day 1, people were quitting and getting off hours into this thing. And I didn't recognize at the time. I'm in my early 20s. But as I've evolved in my journey, I'm looking back at that now and I'm like, I get it. They weren't comfortable sitting in a quiet space because the goal is absolute boredom, right? You couldn't do anything, couldn't bring a book, couldn't fall asleep, there was no phones.
You said you couldn't even change your clothing, or someone got out because they pulled their suspenders down or something.
Yeah, for sure. All these crazy rules. And so it was really a test of mind and boredom. And now looking back, I can fully recognize like they just weren't comfortable sitting in their head thinking. And I think people, have a hard time rectifying their past, meaning they don't want to like think about either mistakes that they've made or guilt that they're carrying or whatever. And so they don't have the ability to, and this is a gift to be able to sit there, process all of that and forgive yourself for your past. And then the flip side of that coin is people have forgotten how to dream. They're living their lives vicariously through screens and watching other people live their lives and have dreams, live out their dreams, that they're sitting there going, I don't even know how to dream. And so I'm going to watch your dreams. And dude, it was the best 10 days of my life because I had every conversation with myself, and any mistake, I was like, okay, how do I overcome that? How do I rectify that? How do I become a better person? And then once I processed all of that, you can do a lot in 10 days of just silence, right? And then I started to dream and formulate. And those 10 days on the Ferris wheel changed my life, because I got off the Ferris wheel, I won the contest, had 10 grand, had a friend in Utah, and hitchhiked a ride to Utah. Met my wife, 25 years of marriage, 5 kids, in this entire journey. None of that happens without the ability to sit there in your own thoughts, process and forgive and dream. And that's what most people can't do, but that's the point of life.
Well, see, and I know Canyon's got some more thoughts too, but I also, you and I are I consider you a brother, a very close friend to me. But I know your entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, you guys own some Crumble cookies. I mean, you are always hustling. So, for the audience, don't be confused that James is just this tiger, this cage tiger when he's on a triathlon or in a boxing ring. But like, you show up every single day in all these different capacities, as a father, as a husband first. And I know and have watched you firsthand do that continuously and always. But this translates to other parts of your life. How do you make sure that you're showing up in each of those roles and prioritizing so that you're taking care of those most important things at the top of your list?
Yeah, I've recently heard Gary V. He's gone on this kick about saying, like, stop making lists and just do. And I'm like, I totally disagree with you, Gary, because you're forgetting where you began. And without a list, you start walking around and bumping around, and you go from one thing to the next. And in order to organize and become great, man, you got to have a system in place. James Clear says your goals are only as great as your systems are, right? And so, Gary, you're wrong, dude. I'm sorry. I hate to say it. I hope you listen to this. But that's not true for the average person. You have figured out how to do it without that now. But most people, if you don't have that structure, like, you need to sit down the night before and go, what are my priorities tomorrow? What's it going to be? What are my 3 things that are at the top of this list? And then after that, what are the bonuses? How am I going to accomplish this thing? Because, dude, like you said, I got 5 kids. I've got 4 different businesses. I did 13 speaking events in 13 different states this month. We did a book launch. I've got a 2-day event in 2 weeks from now that we're promoting and selling tickets for. Like, I'm preparing for 2 world championships later this year physically. I'm going to be a grandfather this year. My third daughter is going on a mission. I'm like, dude, I'll tell you how successful you are when I look at your calendar and what you've got. And so, no, it's about, the reason we're able to do it is because, one, Sunny's amazing, and we understand each other's role and how to support each other doing that. And it's literally about prioritizing your time. You can look at your calendar. Like, if somebody just sat down and wrote everything they did every single day, and then went back and went, okay, there's an hour. Okay, there's 15 minutes. Okay, there's whatever. And all of those are time wasters, right? Non-prioritized moments. And trust me, fam, listen, I ain't saying you can't have fun in life. I'm not saying, like, I'm going to my son's basketball game after this. My wife and I are going out to sushi, but I did a 2-hour ride this morning. I've prioritized this. I delivered 15 books today. Like, I did all these things. I've signed 150 books for my event this Tuesday. Like, you just have to schedule it and plan for it. And yes, I love Jesse Itzler. He's a friend of mine. He's got the big ass calendar club. First thing I do, family things. Those are the most important thing to me. Then what I do, my speaking events. That's my income. Next thing, boom, races. Okay, where's the holes? What can I fill? How can I do it? And then that's the macro, right? And then inside of that, there's lists every single day. And you've got to break it down. Dude, you want to be successful in life? You want to break breakthroughs? I don't care who you are, what your personality is. If you're not structured and don't have it calendared, like, dude, again, Gary, you're wrong. Like, everyone... He's just on this kick right now, and I think it's for social media likes. He's like, F your list, just go do it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, yes, go do it, but be structured and know what you're doing, because if you don't, you're just bumping around the world. You're not accomplishing anything. You're busy, but you're not accomplishing anything. And so you got to make lists.
I think it's an overcorrection where there are people who make too many lists and then don't execute on those lists, or they make the wrong list because they don't take that quiet time, not on a Ferris wheel, but in life, to just ponder and really think through and pray and, really look for guidance and direction.
Well, and right? I think you're right. And if you really break it down, and if I was to sit across from Gary, he would say, well, it's for the personal development junkie or the list maker or the dreamer that doesn't show up. And he's saying, friggin' just do, because you have to just, my number one rule is start, take action, do something. But one of those do somethings is like organize what you're going to do. I tell them so I coach athletes, right? People get fired up. They're like, I want to do an Ironman. I just want to do one. I'm like, awesome, let's do it. And we find the race, we pick the race, and that's the goal. The Ironman, that's as big as they can think, big as they can dream, and it's awesome. And then I engineer the entire training plan, and I give them their first workout. And it's hard for them. It's doable, but it's hard for them. And they're like, oh my gosh, if I can't do this workout with ease, zero chance I can do an Ironman. And I'm like, well, this is the list of things we have to do between now and the goal, right? We're taking action every single day because we have a list. We know what we're doing every single day. It's scheduled out, what workout to do, what days, which intensities, what's recovery, right? We've got the plan. And if you do today, tomorrow takes care of itself. And if you're consistent and disciplined, when you get to your Ironman, trust the process. And I guarantee this is now a victory lap, and you're going to have a hell of a great day.
Through your list, you accomplish it in your head first. And it's like, back to real quick segue back, so that when I decided to run, I've got to get ready for a marathon with James. I set a goal. So I was going to run 250 miles that year before your 50-50-50 by Easter. So I was like, I did the math, and I'm like, okay, about 3 miles a day, like it's about a 5K. So I just set this goal, and it was like, okay, like if I'm going to run 4 days a week or 5 or 3, like I've got to just scale that. And pretty soon I get to Easter, and it was like 257 miles the day before Easter. And I'm like, sweet. But I'm like, okay, now what? Like I got to that summit. Now there's another one. And it's like, I got to push myself again. So I do the math, and I'm like, okay, if I do this for 3 more quarters, that's 1,000 miles this year. I don't need to run 2,000. I don't need to run 5,000. I just want to keep consistent and provide proof to myself, like James Clear, right? I'm adding votes to myself that I am now a runner. And my wife wouldn't even, she was getting pissed because I'm wearing these crappy running shoes, but I'm like, I'm not spending hundreds of dollars on a pair of running shoes until I prove them to myself that I'm a runner. When I've accomplished this goal of 250, I'm going to go invest in a pair of Hokas or Ultras or a nice pair of running shoes. And so forward, I did it, hit the 1,000
miles.
And
I love this quote that you can't see the next challenge until you're ready for it. And just like you set that goal of the was it 150 miles?
250.
250. Yeah. So you set the goal of 250
by Easter.
And you did the work up to that point, and all of a sudden you hit that 250 and you could see the next challenge because you're now ready for it. But you couldn't see it, and you were at the top of that 250 mountain, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a mountain I couldn't see before. Oh, I'm at the base of it. But it's cool, I'm at the top of this one. But that's the whole point of life, right? Like you have to continually show up and have those experiences, and then all of a sudden I'm ready for this challenge that I couldn't see before, right?
Which was the marathon with you. And then right. I did that, and I really struggled, but I was like, I got to keep with my goal. So December 15th, 2015, same year as your 50-50-50, I had planned out this marathon route. I was going to finish and hit my goal with a marathon. So I was literally on a treadmill, and I ran 16 miles on a treadmill and stopped at 0.001 miles before 1,000. I'm like, I'm going to smash my record. And so like 3 days later, I ran another marathon just on my own. I beat the pace that we did on your 50 by like 45 minutes. And,
so cool.
I was stoked with it, and I hit my goal, and it's like, okay, this is freaking cool,
Because you were ready for it.
But yeah, it was, you talk about this a lot. You talked about in your book, this this marathon is 8.5, 5Ks or whatever, breaking it up into bite-sized pieces so you can achieve it. Right.
Yeah. And kind of segueing off that, and you talk a lot about it in your book, not only about mental toughness, but also the consistency with the mental toughness. What are some tips or tricks that you have, maybe for someone that's just starting out, trying to build up that mental toughness and staying consistent with it every day? What can you share to help the average Joe out there starting?
Yeah, for sure. If you're starting, don't overwhelm yourself. And the reason people fail New Year's resolutions is because they put 10 things on the list and they try to be perfect at all of them. And again, I love Jesse Itzler's thing. He's like, no, just add one thing a month. And by the end of the year, you've mastered 12 things, and you've done them, and they stack in progression. But for me, is again, you have to stack those wins, and you have to gain that momentum. And so for anybody starting, it's just like, pick something and win at it. And again, create yourself. I like Andy Frisell in First Form, huge fan of them, and they sponsored the Conquer 100. And he's kind of like, win a moment. And you win moments in the day, you win the day. You win the day again and again. You win the week, you win the week, you win the month, you win the month, you win the year. All of a sudden, if you look back, you've got an amazing life. And it's about consistency. And so everybody's setting this big goal, right? Which is awesome. And then we've got to break it down into manageable pieces. And there's this gap between what do I do now and that big goal. And that gap is discipline. Well, discipline is this like mythical thing that we don't know how to develop or create. And everyone's like, well, you have to have discipline. And we're like, I know, but how do I get discipline? And like, am I born with it? Can I develop it? And I firmly believe that discipline is a skill set that we can all develop and get better at. In order to do it, again, James Clear, you got to have systems. Sorry, Gary, but you got to have lists. And you start following those and you start accumulating those small wins. And all of a sudden, you're developing discipline because of the systems that you have. And I've said this before, but I don't like fake it till you make it, but emulate it until you become it. And as you're going through and following these steps that you've laid out for yourself, and I love Joe Rogan. He said, live your life like a documentary crew is following you. I love that quote. And it's true. And so like, if you wake up every single day and you're like, what would I do if the cameras were on me right now? And if you always have that mindset of like, oh, okay, what I really want everybody to see what I'm doing right now, or what do I want? Who do I want to be in on this, to be portrayed as? And if you do that, all of a sudden we've filled the gap now. And that discipline solves itself because you've now created that as a skill set. And that's how you get from starting and having the goal to that gap that we talked about, is that discipline thing that we're like, how do you get discipline? It's through having systems and showing up, and all of a sudden you're consistent on your way to being disciplined.
Yeah, I think always starting out to build that's obviously, there's a huge learning curve, but kind of like you said, once there's that stack of proof and it's undeniable, I think that's a lot easier to lay back on because you've done it. It's the same thing like with your 50 and 50-50. And then it's like, okay, I've done that. Can we add another 50 to 100?
Yeah. Well, and that was what was interesting too, because we doubled it and everyone was like, oh my gosh, you can't. And I was like, well, I want to double impossible and defy logic. And they were like, you're going to lose your mind because you're doing the same course every single day for a quarter of a year. And I was like, no. That's going to build my confidence as I start to struggle, because I did this course yesterday. And so just like you said, I'm looking to my left and there's my body of work. Well, I'm on day 80 and my body of work is the first 80 days that I did successfully. Well, I can do 20 more of what I just did because I now have experience and knowledge and I have momentum. And I got to the point where there were certain days where it was just like super struggling, and I was, anxiety or depression or confusion or fatigue. And I could just check out because I know where the next corner is. I know where the pothole is on that street that's coming up. I know there's going to be 3 horses on the next corner and they're going to run with me. I know this person's going to be standing, and it becomes such a familiar thing because we've turned it into a very repeatable routine. And so initially when they said you're going to struggle mentally because it's repetitive and the same thing and boredom, I'm going to gain confidence from it because I've done it before. And I was stacking wins every single day. And you get to the moment where you're like, I can't do this. Well, yeah, I can. I did it yesterday. Why can't I do it today?
Yeah, one of your quotes that you share in the book, you talk about putting your uniform on quickly, and that's what I think of when you say that. It's like you knew, I'll just put that uniform on, and then all of a sudden there's a switch, and now you're in, Ironman mode, right?
Well, and I think people too, they get beat up in these really low moments because life isn't about how you navigate the easy times. The easy times are easy, right? It's about how you navigate despair and tragedy and difficulty and depression and all these things that we're dealing with. It's how you manage those moments is who you are. It's the work that we do in the dark when nobody's looking. Those are the test days, right? And so it's what do you do in those darkest moments? And the one of the principles that I've lived by and that I'm trying to get people to understand is you in those darkest moments, nobody can convince me that as an individual, as a human, you can't be perfect for 1 second. A single second. I don't care what you're doing. If you have a skill set in that, even if it's brand new to you, I could play a perfect note, bing, right? Like that's perfect. I did it to perfection, right? And then it's about stringing perfect seconds together until you're through that low, that bottom part, and then you're on the rise again. And then once you're on the rise, those moments become faster, and you string minutes together and hours together, sometimes weeks and months together, and then you dip and you hit the bottom. Well, I can be perfect for 1 second. I can be perfect for one step, one pedal stroke, one swim stroke, right? I can be perfect for just that moment. And then it's about, okay, what's one more second? What's one more second? And so when life's the hardest, you have to be able to like super hyper focus into literally laser point and be like, can I do this one thing for this 1 second? And if that's truth, then you can do it again. And I love the concept too. I know we're going into the weeds here a little bit, but if could you imagine, and you may have heard me talk about this before, Mike, but could you imagine if you treated every single day like day one, like it's the first day you're showing up with that type of excitement? Imagine your first day you were married, first time you met your wife and went on that date, first time you're at the job, first time you knock some, all these first, like how much excitement, first time you held your child, first time, all these first, if we showed up every single day with that type of passion, and everybody accomplishes their New Year's resolutions on day one. And so show up day two like it's day one. If we all had the mindset of, oh, whew, today's day one, and I'll flip that coin all the way on its head. Now treat it as if it's your last day, right? And so in any situation, come in with the same energy, enthusiasm as it's the first time you're experiencing it. I've given my presentation 1,000 times, but it's your first time hearing it in the audience. I have to deliver that presentation as if I'm just coming off this incredible emotional high so that you can feel that. And then how great would my presentation be if I knew this was the last time I'm ever going to deliver it? Could you imagine how different the world would be if we approached everything with like today's day one and the last day?
Yeah, the gratitude
just that emotion.
Level. Yeah, that gratitude that you would have at the end for the moment.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like how amazing! Like you just told me you're headed to Thailand. It's for your first time, right?
Second. So we went last year. I'd been there 30 years ago as a missionary, and my wife and I went.
Oh, did you serve there?
Some family, and I did.
Okay, are you taking anybody? It's our first time.
I'm taking everybody else except for my wife and I. It's all their first time. 10.
Okay, so imagine their excitement because it's their first time going to Thailand, right? And now I want you to imagine the experience you'll have if you think to yourself, "This is the last time I'm going to be in Thailand," right? Now, if you lived every moment, like what if this is the last time I get to see my son play basketball? I'm going on a 5-day trip. And so am I going to sit on my phone or am I going to watch my son? I'm getting emotional. Am I going to watch my son play basketball for the last time? Right? How are we living our lives? How are we showing up in moments? Because ultimately life is about moments. And if we're not in the moment, and this is something I've struggled with, I'm always working on it. I can be accused of being the dad in the stands on my phone, where I'm not perfect. But I'm trying to be better at it. Like this could be the last time I see my son play basketball.
Well, and the other thing too, and you've talked a lot about this, and you talk about it in both books, but we talked about at the beginning, the team that you surround yourself, the we, and you share a couple of experiences. There's a couple that I really, really take to heart and I'm going to implement. And, it's those trigger words like Casey saying, here we go to you, like a reset, right? Like a reset. And then towards the
Total
end of the
mind and
book,
body
you talk
reset.
about smooth sailing, even if it's not like, but you're telling your, okay, we're just going to, so talk about those triggers and then the team that you surround yourself with that knows what you need to hear and when to say it and how to help you get past those moments when you're not at your best, like you're broken.
Yeah, I think we need to arm ourselves with those phrases or those moments. And I talk a lot about, and I can't remember if I talk about in the book. I do. I create a lot of content, so I'm not sure what is where at this point. But I talk about our ethos, and an ethos is what you stand for, black and white, and you have to go into these moments prepared with what you're going to do, almost as if the decision in every moment is already made for you. No decision in the history of decisions has ever been made in the peak of emotion, and you have to lay out an ethos for your spouse. How am I going to treat my spouse? What am I going to do in the situation? Because traveling businessman, you've done it, and I'm sure you've been hit on by women, and they're drunk and whatever, and you're like, well, this would be easy. Decision was already made. I will stay loyal and faithful to my wife. Decision's already made. I'm not going to make a decision in the heat of the emotion of that moment, because that's my ethos. I'm going to be a protector. I'm going to do all these things. What am I going to do in situations with my kids? So when it arises, what's my decision? I've never had alcohol. I'm never going to have alcohol. Somebody presents it to me, decision made, right? Like line in the sand. You have to know your morals and your principles and your values and what you're going to do. Black and white. What is that line in the sand? And the best example of this from the Conquer 100 was day 59. We're in a very brutal bike accident. I'm knocked unconscious. I'm laying in the middle of the road. As I come back to peak of emotion, right? Is my collarbone broken? Is everybody else okay? What is happening? Chaos, right? Aaron, calm as can be. He was doing 112-mile bike rides with me. Aaron's standing over top of me. I come back to consciousness. Aaron's there. He's like, dude, have we finished what we started? You know, are you setting the best example you know how for your kids? You know, have we raised the $250,000 that we committed to for freeing humans that are being sex trafficked? No. All those things are in my ethos. I'm in the peak of emotion, and you know what he says next to me? Get back on your bike. It's time to ride. Decision was made, right? And so you can answer every question in your life based on your morals, values, and principles before the moment ever happens. And then those moments become super easy to navigate. And there's always outliers and different things and situations we can't predict. But if it's a moral situation, which most things are, then the end. It's done. I've already made the decision because of who I am, who I want to be, and the person that I'm trying to emulate, and the destination where I'm trying to get to, the person I'm trying to be.
Yeah, and I know, and you and I are both really good friends. Canyon knows Trevor Farns really well with Mountain Ops. We went to their 10-year anniversary event. It was super awesome.
I just did the
Trevor
podcast with Trevor.
You did. I heard it actually, and he wrote a great book also about conquering. And Trevor talked to you on that podcast, and talked about, and you shared something Ed Milet shares, who I love Ed Milet. When he talks about the fear of meeting that person you could have been at the end of your life, that's the ultimate, like, man, am I going to even recognize this guy? And you shared with Trevor something, and I think it was really cool the way you guys discussed this. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit more. But you're never going to be that person. Like, if you put the savior there, or, I know you're a person of faith, as Canyon and I are as well. If that's what we're trying to get to, is be more like him, then even though we're never going to reach it, we can get close enough to where he can make up the difference. So, like, how do you reconcile that for yourself, and how you check in and make sure you're really achieving that potential that you have?
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are anti-spirituality and whatnot are trying to disprove the Bible or whatnot, which, like, good luck, whatever. But I can't remember what the exact scripture was, but it talks about being perfect and in perfection. And I believe it's been, in my opinion, misquoted or misinterpreted. it's the pursuit of perfection, because we will never be perfected. Like it's this constant pursuit. And that's kind of where I had this conversation, because everyone was like, Ed Milet, chase down the ultimate version of yourself. And I'm like, I really struggled with that, because I'm like, that version of myself keeps changing and it's evolving, because
hopefully it does, right? Hopefully.
And I got to that point where I'm like, oh, it's that pursuit of perfection. And that conversation that I had with Trevor, and the way that I was explaining it was, dude, I now am in, like, that's my mission. Like, I want to catch that dude, but I know I'm never going to. But I want to get to the finish line and be like, son of a,
I almost
got you. I almost got you. and I loved you. And then I want to give him a big hug and say thank you for pushing me,
leading the way.
Yeah, for leading the way. And that version of me constantly changed. Like I did a social media post the other day, and I said, you know what? Because I was heading to kind of a big moment. I was signing a big contract, and I was walking upstairs to do a men's health podcast. And Sunny was like, hey, where are you going? I'm like, I'm just doing a men's health podcast. And then I had to pause for a second. And I'm like, that's not normal. Like no. These opportunities and where we've come. And so I, with the notion of like, we're trying to chase down the ultimate version of ourselves, I think we also have to give ourselves grace in that pursuit, because the version of me 10 years ago is the version of me today that I was trying to chase down. And he would be so proud of me now. And I want the version of me 10 years ago to be infinitely better than this dude sitting here right now. And that's the goal. But the only way to do that is to keep showing up and pushing boundaries in that pursuit of perfection, because we're not perfect. In fact, in this, I'll get some pushback on this. The point of life is to make mistakes. That's the goal. I mean, it's not the goal. It's a
fail faster.
Yeah. Fail faster. I can't remember who said that, but I heard that recently too. It's like, good. I think it was Matthew McConaughey, maybe. Fail faster. He talks about that in his book, Red Light, Green Lights. Great concept. Great read too.
Or Jocko. Good.
Yes, thank you. Good. How do I overcome this? Good. Yeah. This is happening to me. Good. It's an opportunity. So I love all of those concepts. I love that belief system. I think, our podcast is called The Grit Show, and I think that's what it does. It develops grit. But yeah, it's that constant pursuit. And I look back at my life sometimes and where I was, we'll call it stagnant or motionless. And the reason I got going again was because I missed that hustle and grind. I missed the opportunity to fail. I missed the learning moments, because again, like I said, the purpose of this life is to fail. And if you were to ask me right now, Kenyon or Mike, if you guys would say, have you ever failed in your life? Yes, I have, a ton. But my answer is no, because I've turned all those failures into learning opportunities to where I've erased them. And I've applied it differently in different categories. I haven't failed a single time.
You fail when you give up, right?
There it is. Yeah. And I've chosen to go, okay, where was my accountability in that moment? What couldn't I control? And how do I become better from it? Now it's no longer a failure.
What does that guy that you're chasing look like? Like, I'm sure you can't imagine, you'd be in the position you're in, or maybe you did. Maybe you visualized it the whole time. But what does that person look like 10 years from now?
That is a great question, because, I'm in an interesting phase of my life where I'm going to be a grandfather this year. And it's hard to imagine that version because we're always constantly evolving and changing and learning. And as I've aged, I think we're close in age, aren't we, Mike? I'm almost 50.
Yeah. I'm 51. Yeah. I'm just a couple years ahead of you.
And like perception and perspective is always changing, and it's so wild. And so it's interesting, because I hope my belief system continually changes and evolves, and my knowledge again changes and levels up. And so I don't know because it's hard to imagine. Yeah, it's just this like impossible thing, just because as we age, that perspective does change and priorities change, and what we once thought was important is no longer important. And so I don't know what he looks like, but he's still out there, and I want to find out.
Now, that's the spice of life, is figuring that out. And I think, again, when you really, and I've had, we've all done this. I mean, we reinvent ourselves. You have to. I hope you do. I hope you don't wake up at, 10 years old and have it all figured out, and you execute your life like a list, right?
I can't remember who said it, but they were like, your friends are going to tell you you've changed. And then you go, well, that was the point the whole time. I hope I'm not the same idiot I was when I was 20 and 30 and 40. Like, that's the point. Like, when somebody says to me, you've changed, I'm like, good. Thank you.
You know, I wish I was 18 and again when I knew everything. You know, it's just like, it's so funny how just dumb you are because you just don't have life experience. You haven't been hardened by tragedy and all the difficulties and struggle.
Well, and what's crazy, Mike, and I'm sure you'll recognize this, like, we're in the day and age of like information, and you're going to look at Kenyon and I look at my kids and I'd be like, my gosh, if I knew what you knew when I was your age, I'd be invincible sitting here today. Like, our kids, mine, they're way further ahead than I was at that age. And I'm sure like you're looking at Kenyon going, I'm so proud of you. And I'm so excited for your future. Let's continue to grind and work on this. Like, nobody taught us this stuff. Like, dude, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Like, they were like, go outside and play, eat dirt, drink from the hose, maybe come home for a sandwich at 8 p.m. We don't want to see you. Like, that's the age that we all grew up in. But now there's like this information flow and mental health help and like guidance and manifestation and meditation and all these
stem
things.
Cells.
Stem cells and peptides and all these things that, like, it is just a very exciting time. Like, I'd be terrified to live as a young person right now, but in the same time, I would be so fired up because there is so much opportunity, and if you choose to be a dog and get after it, like, dude, you can rule the world. It's wild.
Yeah, I feel like right now with all this information, the generation that's coming up, or even me, right? It's how can we use that information? That's the biggest difficulty. We have everything. Now, how are we able to use that to our advantage and not get distracted?
Yeah, how do you disseminate it? How do you decide what you want to do? How do you pick your path? But here's the gift, Kenyon, is you don't have to know what you want to be for the rest of your life. And actually, the gift is like changing 10 times what you're going to do. That's life. Someone that is like my dad, love him, but we are very different. And he was like, nope, you take no risks. You work the same career for 40 years. You retire, you take your pension, and that's it. And I'm like, that ain't it, bro. And I do not want that. I don't want it for my kids. I've changed. Like, we're just very different. He's very reserved, and I take a lot of risks. And in fact, I asked him, he's like 75 now. I said, hey, Dad, what's one thing that you maybe regret doing? He said, I regret not taking as many risks. I regret staying safe all the time. And I think, like, bro, like, I didn't know I loved golf until I golfed. I didn't know I loved wrestling until I wrestled. I didn't know I loved knocking the dude his ass out the ring until I did it. I didn't know I loved triathlon until I did it. I didn't know I loved speaking on stage in front of thousands of people until I did it. And life is about having experiences and being okay with, like, okay, I've seen a lot of people fail because they're just so rigid on where they're trying to get. And they have this in their mind, like, okay, I'm supposed to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor the rest of my life. Dude, I just had a buddy who went back to med school at age 50 and becomes a doctor, and he's going to be a doctor for 20 years. Like, be okay with following the ebbs and flows of the river of life, and just don't be so rigid. Like, don't have your mind set. I did the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm like, what's the date? I'm 25 days into it. I just made a very conscious decision this year. I said, you know what? I'm giving it all to you, God. It's like, just here, all of it. Like, I'm no longer in control. And dude, I'm like, dude, turn off the faucet. Like, it's so good. It's crazy amazing. And I've been liberated because I'm like no longer worried and stressed. I'm just like, I'm going to show up today and do my work. Put me in front of who I need to put me in front of. Give me the grace to say what I need to say to impact the most amount of people. And I'm going to take tomorrow as it comes. And I'm planning for the future, and I've got big dreams, but like, just put me in the right places at the right time. And I'm just gonna go with it. Like, so as a young person, Kenyon, like, if you can take that bit of advice, just be like, and I don't know how spiritual you are or whatnot, and it doesn't matter, we can still be homies, but like, just if you can just go, you know what, here, it's for you. And I am an instrument and a tool. And to me, it's just brought so much peace on my journey this year. And I'm just like, just help me help people.
What does that contrast look like? So before this year, you wanted that control maybe a little bit more than now. And now you're feeling liberated because you hand that over to God. What does that contrast look like in scenarios that are common in your life?
Yeah, I'm a professional development junkie, so I listen to a lot of people. And Tony Robbins, he's quoted from saying, "You never had control, and so why stop trying to control everything? You've never had control." Like, and the book, The One Thing, focus on the one thing you can control. Everyone's so busy like catastrophizing, worrying about an event in the future. Do you realize, like, I think the number's like over 90 something percent of the things that we worry about never happen. And we're wasting so much time, energy creating, he said this, she said this. And if they said this, you said, I'm going to say this. And if they do this, I'm going to do this back, and we create all these scenarios and it's crippling us. And we just got to come right back to the moment and just go, you know what? A great book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. I love it. It's such a great book. Mark Manson just does an amazing job at articulating it. In fact, Mel Robbins' new book, Let Them, is that same context, but she did such a great job of articulating it. And it's the same concept of, like, I don't give an F to let them do like, it's the same concept. They just articulated it very differently. And I think that both those books are a great read. I had Sonny read it. I've got my kids reading it, and it's just massively impactful. And I think that's another liberating thing that she talks about in the book is just like, I'm not going to let the way that you're operating impact me, and I'm not going to take on that burden. I'm not going to pick up your boulder and put it in my backpack. Like, I got all my own stuff that I'm trying to navigate, right? I need to carry everybody else's. And so I think those are amazing concepts, and the world would just be a different place. And so that was a huge shift I kind of did this year, and I've prioritized it. I'm just, we're all on a journey. We're all figuring stuff out. We're all bumping around, and it's just, developing a new perspective and perception at all times. Again, that pursuit that we've been talking about.
Yeah, in your book, you talk about not overlaying a catastrophe over a problem, and in the same line. And I can't remember where I read it. I'm like, I'm kind of a junkie for all the self help stuff, and always looking for new ideas and angles. And I can't remember where I read it, but they basically, it was like, after something happens, good or bad, it's like, so what? Not so what, like I don't care, but like, okay, now what? And I got that in business. It's like, okay, now what? Like, okay, this happened or it's happening. Do you want to talk about it for another hour, or should we get to work at fixing it and addressing it?
Well, and that was what's happened with us and what we discovered had to be the way on the 50 was we became master problem solvers. It was, yeah, adapt and move forward. What's keep throwing stuff on the table. I'll share the very short version of it, but got into a lot of trouble in the 2012 world record and called up Lucy, and I was on the ground and I couldn't get up. And as a 9-year-old girl, she was like, Dad, can't you just get up and walk and finish? And I was like, no, can't. And then she was like, okay, Dad, crawl and finish. And I was like, you don't understand. Can't. And then she's like, okay, great. Keep in mind, I got 9 more miles to go. She's like, okay, Dad, cartwheel, 9 miles. Humor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she can't see the option to quit. It's not on the table. She hadn't learned how to quit yet at that part of her journey. And she was going to keep presenting options until I took one that I deemed to be acceptable. And I was like, I don't know what option 4 is. I'm going to cartwheel. And so I stood back up and navigated the rest of that day, finished it, and it changed everything about the rest of my journey. And I just think people that have failed or misstepped, then they start to associate themselves as a failure. And you have to have the mindset of, no, there's an answer here. There's a solution. We just haven't thought of it or tried enough things to make it work. And sometimes that means pivoting, changing directions, being okay with that, solving that problem. But I think as adults, we've just learned how to quit because of failures or missteps we've had. And then it becomes our identity, and now we use it as an excuse. And so, yeah, we have to have that mindset of like, dude, the only way to fail is to stop showing up. And everybody quits. And so, like, that's why it's so easy to life. Why I think it's so easy to win at life. I'll just outwork you. In time, you're going to quit, and I'm going to be the only person standing left, and I'm going to win. And so I love that. I mean, I hate to say it, but everybody quits. And I know eventually I'm going to emerge victorious because, and if I don't, I'm going to be surrounded by a bunch of winners. And those are the people I want to hang out with anyways, which is super, super cool.
Yeah, and part of that, and I had a front row seat to a lot of this journey because of my involvement plus following, even though I was traveling the country. And I remember when you were on can't remember that streaming service. What was it called? Like on Twitter, Periscope. I was on Periscope watching you guys every day, and people were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, just shut up. I'm watching this thing, and, but, on the 100, your injuries and that boot that they made for you, that brace, and then the fact that you turned that lemonade or that lemon into lemonade, where now all these people, include my wife, did it too. I mean, we actually, it was harder to walk a marathon for me fast than to run, honestly. But you were able to allow thousands of people to join you that otherwise couldn't have been a part of that journey, right? Because of that
Yeah,
problem.
you nailed it, and it was this beautiful.
It's a gift.
It was a gift because I didn't recognize it in the moment until it started to happen over and over again. But I was so mad that I was walking because I'm just like, I'm just giving the haters fuel because I'm going slow. And I wanted to do these fast, and I wanted to really showcase athleticism, and I just wanted to silence them all. And then I started because of the injuries that I had, I wasn't quitting, and I kept putting one foot in front of the other, and then all of a sudden they start to chirp. And it turned out to be one of the greatest things because every single day, without fail, I am so glad you're going so slow because it's allowed me to come participate with you and be part of this journey. And I wouldn't have been able to have this experience had this not happened. And so I think sometimes in life we truly have to recognize that the hardships that we're going through are purposeful because they're gifts to those around us. And that's really hard to wrap your mind around in the moment, that our struggle is somebody else's gift. But again, we're not in control. And I look back on it, and although I absolutely hated it in the moment, it's the greatest thing that happened on the Conquer 100 because we were coming right out of the pandemic, and it's what we needed as people, and it brought community together. And I don't think community would have come together in a big way had I been thrown down like these fast times and numbers. And so again, I was never in control. And our struggles are gifts for other people. And if we can framework it that way, it helps us to navigate those struggles and difficulties. And sometimes we ask, man, why am I the one dealing with this right now? And it's because God knows what our strengths are, and he knows what we can and can't handle. And he knows he can see further down the road than we can. And he's prepared us for those moments so that we can give that gift to somebody else.
It's another quote I like to share, and it's along these lines, and it's like, life is happening for us, not to us. So even those really, really tough things are actually a gift, or just what we need in those moments, even though we can't see it at the time.
Well, it was amazing, and I've heard guys like Bradley say, the girl who's getting raped and blah blah blah, she's not choosing that; it's not for her. Well, I had Elizabeth Smart on my podcast, and her perspective was, no, that happened for me so that I could help other individuals navigate that journey and post. And I was just like, holy cow, your story is tragic, and what you dealt with was unimaginable. And she was like, no, this happened for me so that I could give this gift of support to others. And so I believe that. And that's not coming from me, who was a victim of something that's horrendous. That's coming from a victim. And she has that mindset. She was able to get, if you haven't listened to that episode with Elizabeth Smart on the Grit Show that we did, it's like, holy cow. Wow.
Yeah, my wife and I did, and there were a lot of tears. It was quite.
That was a hard interview to do.
Wow. Well, so you also had your mom joined you. You talk a lot about everybody has their hard. You could do 100 full distance triathlons. That's very hard for any human, but you did it. Someone else's hard might be a 5K. I mean, your mom did some of the 5Ks. Your daughter did all 50. You challenged people on the 1 year anniversary. I did it. I did 50 5Ks in a row in 50 days. That was hard for me. It really was, like the injuries and the nagging, even though it's so stupid compared to what you dealt with, but like, it's crazy how, that can translate to helping anybody overcome whatever it is in front of them that they don't believe that they can quite get through.
Yeah. I think that notion of everybody's heart is different is important for us to understand. And I got to support a young man named Chris Nikich through a Chicago marathon. He was breaking the world record for the most. He's got Down syndrome, and so he needs a guide. And his concept is like be 1% better every single day. And I've kind of taken that a little bit, and I'm like, be 1% more kind and empathetic for those around us, because we have no idea what anybody's going through in that moment. And everybody's heart is different, meaning also that what's hard for us in certain moments that are circumstantial are different as well. Because let's say I'm presenting to 500 individuals, and two of the attendees have a conversation in the hallway or have a discussion, and it turns into an argument, and they interact in a negative way. One of those individuals woke up this morning, got a phone call, and their mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And that's not normally how they would react in that moment, but they were just like, we have no idea. And he didn't come out and say, my mom was diagnosed with cancer today. I'm sorry. That's why I was doing that. He was just so emotional and had a reaction. And then it triggered this other person, and that person's an idiot and they're a moron and all these things, right? But dude, he was dealing with something that was so out of the ordinary for him. And so in that moment, his heart was different. And that 1% compassion and empathy for others, because we truly have no idea what somebody's going through. And I don't know if you saw in the news the other day here in Utah, a mother who gave birth to twins.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a friend of ours. And I worked with the gentleman. It was his brother's daughter. And my daughter's the same age. It's Lucy, and she's expecting right now. And she's having our first grandchild in July. And let's just happen to say I ran into the father's name, Brian. I ran into Brian in the airport, and he said something to me, or he didn't even know I was there, and he said something off to someone, reacted some way. And I'm like, man, come home to Sonny. Remember Brian? He's a dick. He just lost his daughter, in a very tragic accident. And I wouldn't have known that. And so it's just, we just never know what somebody's going through. And so I try to say it from stage all the time, like, could you imagine if this entire room was 1% kinder and empathetic to those around us, the ripple effect that could possibly have? And I follow it up with, you don't know whose life you can change. In fact, you don't know whose life you could save by reacting differently in that moment. Maybe your kindness stopped someone from going home that evening and taking their own life. Like, we just don't know those moments that matter and can be insanely impactful.
Yeah, that's awesome. And at just hearing you talk about these past experiences and kind of diving into your book Iron Hope, while you were writing it and reflecting on these feats and experiences that you were able to have yourself and share with other people, was there a specific moment that maybe stood out? Doesn't have to be like a favorite, but was there a moment that stood out to you when reflecting while you were writing?
Yeah, for sure. It was, there's a couple stories in the book of individuals that we met along the way or that reached out to us where they were dealing with something major in their lives. And they would wake up every single day and they were like, he's getting in the water again. He's choosing to continue to fight every single day when he has every reason to quit. And that's the reason we named it Iron Hope. It was because our team's willingness to suffer intentionally has given people hope on their journey to where they're dealing with something that they maybe didn't choose or just trying to navigate. And it's those moments and those stories, and we put a couple of them in the book that were just like really touched us. And we get tons of those all the time. And so I'm like, man, I'm just so blessed that we chose to do that so that other people can have the courage and hope on their journey to continue to fight.
Along those lines, what, James, is, if there is one thing, or what's something that's just been very surprising to you as you look back, like on all of these things you've done, like what's, I don't know if shocking's the right word, but what's like pleasantly surprising, or what did you not expect that you're like, wow, this is, happened because of this?
I think it was on the 100 when I just saw community come together. And it was just so overwhelming. And again, it was at a time we were coming out of the pandemic and it was so needed. And as humans, we're tribal people. And the worst science experiments on the planet that led to depression and spousal abuse and uptick in addiction and all these things. Like, we need each other. And it gave people a purpose to get outside and move their bodies. And it was so fun on that run trail, hundreds of people around us every single day, just to hear conversations. Hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Oh, tell your story. And it was just like this buzz of energy of humans getting together, connecting, doing something for a common purpose. And so just find your people and get out and do things. I'm just like, again, contrasting and watching this new generation who is isolated and following people's dreams on a phone, and they're like waiting for their purpose and passion to like knock on their door. And I'm like, bro, the gift in life is to go out and have experiences. And yeah, it's scary and sometimes it's uncomfortable, but the people you meet and the experiences that you get to have, and I have very deep, lifelong friendships that I would have never had I not talked to the people on the trail, or had they not come from. And this is like global. I have friends globally because this has opened up doors for me. I've got to speak in 57 countries around the world. That's insane to me, Mike. Like that opportunity, and it's just like do challenging things and do experiences, because the relationships become so rich. And so what surprised me is how valuable community is, and how everybody seems to come together. And to that note, I've spoken in 57 countries around the world, and we're not so different all around the world. We all have a heart in our chest, and we're trying to wake up every single day and navigate and find our worth. And are we good enough? And am I contributing enough? And do they love me? And how am I, as a provider, am I doing enough for my kids and my family, and my wife? Like, we're all dealing with these same things. And so we're not so different from everybody else. And we are the human race. And I think we should, if we've learned anything through this past dumpster fire of a political landscape, it's division that's not serving us. And if we can figure out how to come together as a country and on a global landscape, it'll serve us all in a massive capacity.
Well, you've certainly done a lot of that. Again, firsthand, I sent you some text with some videos and some pictures, sidewalk chalk on the trail, signs people were making, cowbells ringing, signs on people's decks as we're running past, let's go James, and updating it every day. And just, it was electric to be involved with that. So, thank you for bringing our community together that I know clearly adores and loves Iron Cowboy, but also what it represents, and that team that, we're all part of this human race. That's so beautifully stated.
Yeah. And again, thank you for all your support in the journey, and allowing me to push you, and then you in turn setting the example for me of being hard worker and businessman and a supporter and father and all these things. And so I look up to you, man, as well. And so I appreciate you showing up and being part of my journey and letting me be part of yours.
Yeah, we sure appreciate that. So James, I guess last question. So when I get to primal James Lawrence, like just that primal thing, like what with everything stripped away, what do you hope that represents or looks like, at your core of your core?
Yeah. This is my final quote that I share from stage. And there's no success outside your home that'll ever compensate for failure inside your home. And I don't want to be known for the 50 or the 100 or anything else. I want to be known as the hero in my own home. And that's my focus. That's like my drive. And I want to be the best dang grandfather I can. And I want to continue to support my kids and just create this really tight family unit to where we can count on each other and we get to have experiences together.
Well, you've built some great humans, and they're going to continue to serve. And appreciate you. We love you, and we appreciate you and you joining us today.
Thanks, man. It's been fun.